You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This is the show where I introduce you to people who have a story to tell, specifically from their experiences hiking a long-distance trail, and very often that trail is the Appalachian Trail. I've done it twice myself in my 60s, but this is a trail for all ages, and we try to bring you young, old, middle-aged people who've taken the time out of their lives to live a simpler, much quieter, more beautiful few months than you'll get anywhere else. And today, we're at the younger end of the spectrum with a couple of 20-somethings, well, at least I think they are anyway, who made that decision and went in 2019, which was the year of my second thru-hike. And the great thing about this story is that Reid Marshall and Marina Santiago didn't know each other before they set out. I met Reid when I was about to enter New Hampshire and was struck by how laid back he was, and you're certainly going to hear that today. But that's how the trail is, yet you never know what or who's going to be around the corner. Wombat and Brown-Eyed Girl will be on shortly. And our ATC segment today introduces us to one of my very favourite AT people. Laurie Podiger is going to talk to us in the Know Before You Go mini-series about exploring locally. We'll hear from Laurie after our two guests. And following last week's chapter about people who go for multiple times on the trail, this week Larry Luxenburg's Walking the Appalachian Trail talks about every hiker's favourite topic, food. Yep, we can all pig out today. But before we do, let's hear from Wombat and Brown-Eyed Girl. I should warn you that I was in Florida for this. Wombat was in hotel quarantine in Australia and Brown-Eyed Girl was in Denver. The Wi-Fi was sometimes a little shaky, but it all seemed to work out in the end. Here's Reid and Marina. I'd like to introduce you to a couple today from my class, the class of 2019. They're Reid Marshall and Marina Santiago, or Wombat and Brown-Eyed Girl. Hi guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Howdy. It's going good today.
Good. And Wombat and I met on our thru hikes right on the Vermont-New Hampshire border in a hostel, and I was stumbling north and Wombat was rocketing south. And if I recall rightly, Marina wasn't in the vicinity. So Wombat, we hung out that evening. So let's start with you. You're from Australia. What on earth brought you around the world to hike the AT?
Oh, well, that flight was quite the trip.
I bet.
Well, went straight from high school to university, straight from university to working for the government. It was like 18 months into my job and was like, I really need a break.
18 months. Yeah, I can see why that would be a thing.
Yes, I asked for some time off, a lot of time off, about 4 months, and bought some tickets to New York and caught some buses up to Maine and thought I'd give it a crack.
Oh, you went by bus, did you, from New York? Oh, that must have been quite an interesting ride. What was that like?
Oh, it's actually kind of terrible.
Of course it was.
And then I got to Millinocket and I was just waiting and I didn't know if I was getting picked up to go to the hostel or not. So I thought I might just be left at that garage forever.
Nice, yeah. Yeah,
and I didn't know anyone.
You wouldn't want to be abandoned there, would you really? Yeah, it was a little bit of a nightmare. So you took your 4 months off. That's amazing. They gave you 4 months off and you'd only been there 15 months?
Yeah, something like that.
You must either be really good at your job or they are desperately short of staff there.
I'd like to say I was pretty good.
Yeah, I still think you should do. Yeah. So what did you do? What were you doing for a living?
So I was a chemical engineer, but I was working in risk engineering, health and safety in mines, petroleum and gas, explosives, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't throw those away too easily, can you? So they gave you 4 months off. And how did you gear up then? Did you bring it with you on the plane, or did you put it together when you were here? Because you're limited in obviously on planes what you can bring with you, aren't you?
Yeah. So I think I had most of the stuff already from just hiking and camping around Australia, but I did gradually get more things, like trekking poles, things I wouldn't normally use to get ready. And
All right.
I think I was well under I only had the one bag, and I just fitted in to my enormous 70-liter Osprey pack that I had at the time.
Did you make many changes in your gear on the trip?
Oh, definitely. I think luckily I got some holes in that pack, and Osprey were kind enough to send me a new pack, and I was like, "Hey, can I have the lightest pack you have?" So they sent me the Levity 45, which was like at least a kilogram lighter than the previous pack.
That makes a difference. Americans don't do metric. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, right. Okay, just we need to know that. Yeah. By the way, did you say you dumped a harmonica?
Yeah, I had a harmonica, I had a bowl and a cup.
You were carrying like full liters of soy milk at the beginning too, weren't you?
Yeah. I was like, I gotta have my coffee with soy milk.
So, what about you, Marina? You're not Australian. And funny, where actually are you living right now?
I'm in Denver right now, but when I was getting on the trail, I was living in Boston, and I'm originally from Illinois.
Okay. So what was your plan? How did you come to the trail?
So it's been something that, I heard of as a kid, and I'd been wanting to do for quite a few years. And at the time I'd been working as a scientist in a biotech company, and it was a startup. So in February or March, around that time, 2019, the company started having some financial problems. They laid off like a third of the people at the company. And I was actually kind of hoping they'd lay me off so that I could hike the trail, but they didn't. And when they didn't, they ended up asking me to take on a different role. And I thought about it for a really long time, and I ended up deciding that it wasn't a good idea. And so I decided to just fully quit my job and then just start getting ready to hike the Appalachian Trail as soon as I could.
As listeners know, I love the fact that you youngsters are quite happy to quit your job and you couldn't give a crap because you're going to get another job. And the timing, you never know, do you? Especially now these days. But so too effectively, you're both scientists. Then is that right?
Kind of.
You're chemical engineer. How'd that work out then? There's an attraction. So, so you've been a hiker prior to going on the AT, then, Marina?
Yeah, I'd been backpacking semi-regularly since college. Boston's pretty close to New Hampshire and the White Mountains, so I'd been working my way through the 48 4,000 footers up there. I'd done some in upstate New York, some in Vermont.
So you knew what you're doing, which is good. And I know that when we spoke before, you mentioned being baseline stressed about safety. What's that actually mean? What does that actually mean to you? What were you thinking at the time?
So when I said that before, it was in the context of I hiked alone almost the whole time before I met Wombat. And
by the way, listeners, I got to tell you, she told me that's how she refers to him now. She calls him Wombat.
I can't change it in my head. I know his name is Reid, but he's Wombat.
Awesome.
But yeah, so until I started hiking with him and a couple other folks, I'd been by myself, and I didn't realize until I started hiking with them that until kind of that stress dropped away, that I'd been worried always about, what am I going to find when I get to the shelter? If something happens, is someone going to find me? Is there anyone in front of me or behind me? And, I don't know if you remember, but in May of that year, there'd been that machete killing. And so that was always a little bit in the back of my head, I think.
I remember it very, very well. And I did wonder at the time, what would especially the young women on the trail, or any woman on the trail, but what would their families think? Did you get any issues about that from your family? Did they know that had happened?
They did know that happened. My stepmom sent me, I think she was the one that told me about it. She sent me the link about it.
Right.
But my mom, my mom said that she wasn't worried about me at all because I kickbox and I probably could kill anyone that wanted to kill me.
It's true.
So actually, what Wombat should have been more scared than you. So, as I say, when I ran into Wombat, he was by himself. But by the time you both finished at the top of Springer in Georgia, you were a couple. How did the two of you meet? Because I know you went both ways, didn't you, Marina? You went north and south, didn't you? So tell us how that worked out.
So in reference to that, Katahdin, I was supposed to be just a straight southbounder, but Katahdin opened so late that I ended up just getting on the trail in Massachusetts and heading north before getting a ride from a friend back down to Massachusetts and heading south. But when we met, so I'd been getting over some food poisoning or something, and so I was like feeling a little more exhausted than usual, and so this was in New Jersey, and I get to the shelter. I think I'm the first one there, but when I get there, there's this like extra scraggly old man and his dog there.
For the AT?
Yeah, like everyone's scraggly, but he was like another level. And I said, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, I guess it's just us here tonight. We got the place to ourselves," or something like that. And I was just really uncomfortable with that. So I left and set my tent up. Went to go set my tent up, and I was just so exhausted. I was kind of sitting on the ground, waiting, trying to get motivated to deal with all the things you have to do. And this guy comes up, and my first thought was like, "Thank God I'm not alone at this place with this guy." It turned out to be Wombat. And eventually some other people that I knew came by that night, and we actually had a really good time. But the next morning I get up pretty early, and so it was still kind of dark outside, and I packed up and like went to the privy on my way out, but someone was in the privy.
More romantic. This is getting more romantic by the second.
And eventually Wombat comes out of the privy, and I like go in to use it, and when I get out again, he's still there. And I said, "Oh, you aren't waiting for me, are you?" I said, "You aren't waiting for me, are you?" He said, "Oh, yeah. Do you want to hike together?" And we ended up hiking together that day, and then every day after that.
Was the attraction fairly immediate and mutual, Wombat?
Essentially, because I kind of assumed, because I'd heard about Brown Eyed Girl from a couple of people who had already met her. But I'd assumed she was like at least 50 years old, judging by the only other women that I'd met on the trail. And then when I saw her on that log, I was just kind of flabbergasted.
Because you weren't 50. It's not the greatest endorsement of all time.
And in the morning, it was kind of embarrassing because I was on the toilet for a very long time because I was looking through the guidebook on my phone. I was like planning for the next 3 days at least. So I was like on the privy for like maybe 10 minutes. And then I come out.
Bad form, by the way.
Yeah. I come out and there's this beautiful woman there waiting to use the privy. And I'm like, oh, great.
Classy, very, very classy. So it's funny actually because when we spoke the other day, you seem quite up and pretty much all the time, Marina. I may be entirely wrong, but Wombat is really laid back in here, and that was one of my first takeaways from him. You're very, very different, and perhaps opposites attract. So did you find that those differences good in those early days, and then hiking together for the rest of the time?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, sometimes it's a source of stress, but I'm a planner, I guess, and I plan things out pretty thoroughly. So I guess it was good for Wombat because I always knew where I was going to stay. I always knew like if we were going to get a ride or not. I had all like the phone numbers and the shuttles. But Wombat is very good at telling me like like on the trail, you often said like "you goose" or like "you silly, you silly duck" or something when I was started like being overly, I don't know, anxious about whatever it was I was being anxious about that day.
That's what being a couple's all about, I've got to tell you. So how did that change the dynamic of your hike? Because you're fairly fast. As I say, you were rocketing south at the time. So I think we met mid-July and you started, you'd already done Maine and the White Mountains in about 2.5 weeks, I think, which seems impossible to me. So were you relatively equal hikers in terms of speed of hiking?
Roughly similar. I'd say we're probably very similar pace. It's just I won't stop, or I won't want to stop until I've reached a certain milestone that I've set out, or I'd want to even push past that just to further challenge myself every day.
Oh my God.
And then Brown Eyed Girl wasn't quite used to doing those miles yet, even though she could.
And I would say that you're faster than me, but I'm better on some types of terrain.
Oh, like she's much better on rocks.
I'm very good at hiking on rocks from all the hiking in New Hampshire I did.
So you must be one of the few people who enjoy Pennsylvania then, in that case.
Oh my gosh, we loved Pennsylvania. We'd been hearing so many horror stories about it, but we actually really enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot less hilly. And the rocks aren't bad. Yeah,
you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a lot less hilly, but the rocks are bad. For me, they were terrible. Now, I've often meant to ask this question when I've spoken to couples, and I've never asked it actually who met on the trail. Did getting together allow you to ditch some of your duplicated stuff? Like a tent maybe, or cooking gear and things like that? Or did you keep those things separate and keep those things all the way through?
I guess we kind of kept almost everything all the way through.
All right. Okay.
I think so.
I think it was complicated by the fact that for most of the hike, Wombat had to go back to Australia, and so it wasn't really even till towards the end that we were like, yes, this is something that we definitely want to pursue. Sure. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep up, so I wanted to keep hold of my whole things. All my stuff.
So it's a defensive measure as much as anything. Yeah, kind of cool. I like that. and I was going to say that obviously the relationship developed as you headed further south, but you are both locationally challenged. Did the thought that you'd soon be splitting up come up quite early for you both? Or did you just think we're having a great time and we just see how it goes, but he's going back to Australia and I'm going back to wherever I'm going back to?
Yeah. I think we kind of ignored it for a month.
Oh, really?
I don't think so. I think early on we said, let's keep this pretty low key because you have to go back. And then it was very hard to keep low key, I guess. And then slap that after the month, we tried to address that.
So how soon did you rethink then your after hike plans? Because, you have to have plans, you have to do stuff. And you certainly, because of your, I guess your visa, Wombat had to go back to Australia at a certain period of time. How quickly did you start thinking about changing some of those plans? Because you didn't go back, I know, straight away.
Yeah, well, I think it was in North Carolina. We were leaving Hot Springs when Brown Eyed Girl told me that she loved me, and then I think it might have been
the idea. Make it public, nice.
I think maybe the same day or the day after I asked if I could have more time off from work, because I had a 6-month visa and we're going to actually finish in just over 3 months for me. So I had some spare time to work with and we could hopefully pull something together.
And you did. But before you got there, I'm not going to go into that yet, because before you got there, you had this great adventure together, and there is something very special about sharing the hike with somebody, whether you're in a romantic relationship with them or not. Sharing that time out. I mean, I hike with a 66-year-old bloke like myself, and he is always going to be special, in my life, because of the times time we spent together, but we weren't romantically linked, and it's quite emotional when you finish. So inevitably, you eventually started up that, as I always call it, that scrubby little path to the top of Springer. How were the two of you feeling right then as you were walking up those last, I think it's 0.9 of a mile up from the car park?
Yeah.
I felt so overwhelmed, I guess, that the only thing I just felt like I was pushing down every emotion, and the way I was pushing it down was just hiking as fast as I possibly could. It was a mixture, and then like getting to the top, it was a mixture of both relief because I was getting quite tired on the trail, and I had some sores on my back from my pack that wasn't fitting quite right, and it was getting harder and harder to find water. And so there's a lot of relief there, but there's also just a lot of sadness that things are going to become more complicated now. I have to go back to a world where you have to do more than just get up in the morning and walk. And we're going to have to figure out how to manage a trans-Pacific relationship and all these things.
There's a long way. So the emotion you were feeling when you were going up there, that was partly because you knew the after hike would have been different, but it is the whole thing's physically debilitating, isn't it? I mean, even though you did it in 3 months, it takes a lot out of you. What was it like to get over it physically?
The biggest problem that I've had since the trail is so at one point I sprained my ankle and then ignored it for the rest of the hike, or tried to ignore it. And it's just been not quite the same since then. And my feet didn't feel right for a couple of months afterward either, but I think they've gotten a lot better.
And how about you, Wombat? What were you thinking as you were walking up the path there, up Springer?
Oh, well, I was really worried I wouldn't feel anything. But
why? Why would you think that? Why would you think that?
Because I wasn't feeling anything when I pictured it in my head.
Oh, really?
Like leading up to it, and I'd think of finishing, I wouldn't actually feel anything. And it was really strange. And I wanted to feel something. But the closer and closer we got, like the more emotional I got. And I think even that morning, I was trying to fill up water from a stream, and I couldn't get the lid on my Sawyer bladder for some reason.
Sure.
And then even that brought me to tears. I was just like so frustrated and emotional. But as we got closer and closer, that last 0.9 miles, I guess, started from a fast hike to a kind of a jog to a run. And I kind of collapsed on the plaque. And it's a special moment. Grief, really. Initially grief, because I had basically lost the trail at that point.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard someone say they've lost the trail. Does it still feel like a loss not to be out there?
No, I think it was only short-lived, and I think because I've reached it just before Brown Eyed Girl, and then when she came over and we like kind of hugged for a very long time.
Yeah, it
kind of shifted towards triumph, but that was like a tingling of grief that was still in there.
Wow, that's quite something. And apart, of course, from meeting the love of your respective lives, what do you think you both took away from the hike? What did the hike give you, quite apart from each other?
You go first.
All right. I think Brown Eyed Girl already talked about simplicity. I love the simplicity, but I think it gave me the power to do exactly what I want to do and not be afraid to give something up to do that. So like since then, I've quit my job and working on exactly what I
they paid the back of it for being so good to you. You quit your job.
Yeah, I felt really bad.
Impressive as hell. So you quit your job you quit your job when you came back?
Yeah, shortly after I came back, I quit my job, and then Brown Eyed Girl came to Australia, and we went on a kind of a research trip for a book we're working on. which
Yeah,
is
we're going to come to that in a minute.
semi-holiday.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that in a minute. But before all of that, before she came over to Australia,
Yeah.
you didn't actually go back home. You then went on a bit of a road trip, didn't you? Where'd you go?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we went to Utah, and we drove around all the national parks.
Nice.
And hiked and trail ran all around the national parks of Utah, and it was awesome because that's so alien to, especially to the to the Appalachian Trail.
I'm sure it's very different. And was that where the idea for Challenge and Beauty came about? And before you tell us about what Challenge and Beauty is first off.
Well, initially it was just something I heard a Chinese ice climber say when he was talking about what he looked for when he was searching for the best ice climbs in the world. Nice. And the two things he said were beauty and challenge. And that really resonated with me. And that's how I wanted to basically live my life, is to search for those things in everything, or put myself in situations where I can challenge myself, and then be in a beautiful environment or doing something beautiful. And I felt like the AT was that a lot.
And I think the other piece of it is that there is a lot of beauty in the challenge itself. And so like when you're climbing to the top of a mountain or something, that view is just so much better because of the work that you put into it.
Yeah, it's a reward. It's a reward, isn't it?
Yeah, and you could see that view. You know, someone could take a picture of it. You could see that view whenever you want, but it has so much more meaning when you've done the work.
So what's the idea of Challenge and Beauty then? Tell us about that first, then we'll talk about your book. It's a great name, but what is it?
So it started in Utah. Brown Eyed Girl came up with the idea to turn our experience into a guidebook, so that other people could experience the great time that we got to experience.
Sure.
And then it became our thing of like rating the different trails in terms of how challenging they were and how beautiful they were.
Nice.
So it's a company. So Challenge and Beauty is a company that's publishing trail running and hiking guides to, in theory, parks around the world. And so far we've done Utah and we've done Tasmania and Australia. Hopefully we'll do some more. But we also want to start at some point in the next year or two organizing trail running adventure tours. So that'll probably be a bit better of a money maker than writing books.
Well, funnily enough, don't the two of you think back to when you started? Let's face it, it's less than 2 years ago you started this hike. Did you ever imagine that your life would take such a different direction from what you were doing in the past? No,
2 years ago, man. I was on a completely different path. It was just a completely different life, completely different experience. And now I'm still consulting for biotech companies part-time, but I'm doing it part-time so that I can, build a different life. So,
and I'm going to ask you about something else in a minute, but who moves? I asked you this before actually, and you didn't really know the answer. You both laughed. Who moves? Do you see your future location independent from the point of view? Does it matter where you are, or are you going to be in Australia, or are you going to be in America? What do you think?
That's the $1 million question. I think the perfect world is us going back and forth roughly every 6 months. We have to figure out what the right way to do that is, immigration and visa wise.
Oh wow! Oh my gosh! Yeah, there's all sorts of issues there. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that. That's fine. Knock yourself out. You sent me another interesting concept. This time it was a book that you're both writing and illustrating together. And is hiking and trail life going to be the future for the next few years. And are you going to sell this book and publish it yet? Or where are you with that?
Yeah. I think we've made some good progress. It still needs a lot of work. But yeah, we'd love to.
Great drawings. The ones I've seen are great drawings. Really good. Really fascinating. They weren't done at the time, were they? By the way.
No. I kind of wish they were, but
Right.
we used a lot of our own pictures as inspiration for the drawings.
Nice. So tell me, how are you going to publish it soon, or when's it going to be?
Hopefully soon. We'll plan to get it published soon in the States. And if not, we might just self-publish it like our other books. But it'd be good to get it published by someone else.
Yeah, but you can do it yourself. It's a piece of cake.
We could do it ourselves.
It is easy to do. I'm not, off camera, we can talk about it if you want at some stage, because it's dead easy to do by yourself. So any other hikes or runs planned, or is what you're trying to do now is think in terms of the business, or are you trying to find the hikes you want to hike and then plan some business result out of those hikes?
Man, both.
Yeah.
So I really want to do the CDT sometime in the next year or two. Wow. Kind of see what the COVID situation looks like this summer, and whether or not Wombat can come over here and do it with me, but sometime in the next couple of years. And related to that, we want to start doing these trail running adventure tours, and the CDT hike would be partially a research trip for that. And I spent a lot of time in the Black Hills in South Dakota this summer doing some research, and I want to go back and do a hike there that I think we could turn into a trail running adventure tour. And we have so many ideas. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to balance this planning and this company with actually making enough money at our other jobs to survive and eat.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. So are you working now, Wombat, or not? I mean, are you working full time on Challenge and Beauty?
I'm basically working full time on Challenge and Beauty.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you doing consulting or anything like that? Being a chemical engineer, you can work anywhere, can't you?
It is a very broad. Like, lots of people just want engineers, and especially chemical engineers for their problem solving. But once I get out of hotel quarantine, I think I'm going to plan on doing some graphic design study, because that's been really interesting to me, working on our books and trying to get them to like a professional publication level. Guidebook has been really involved and really interesting, and I've really enjoyed that.
And he's been really good at it. The Tasmania book, the Utah book was our first try, and it doesn't look half as good as the Tasmania books. They look really nice. And we put so many good pictures in there that they're practically like a coffee table book. You can just kind of look through.
I love the pictures. There's terrific to have pictures on, and your drawings, I say, on your AT book were great. You sent me an example, and I couldn't find the two of you meeting. So I'm glad you told me the story about you meeting.
Yeah.
And spending about 20 minutes on the toilet. Very impressive with the AT. Well, look, I'm glad we met in actually it was in Vermont, wasn't it? Yeah, just before we crossed over the border, or I crossed over the border. And I said I'd get back to you at some stage, but in the end, you reached out to me, so I'm pleased we did that. And I'd love you to meet you as well, Marina. And
it was great to meet you.
I just wish you well to see the two of you having met on a journey. You had no idea afterwards that what was going to happen, and then you met, and then you're planning your life together, doing something to do with hiking and running. I think it's just freaking great. I love it. So I'm really pleased, and thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Take it easy. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't you love that name and the sentiment behind it? Challenge and Beauty. As I said, Reid is a laid-back guy, very thoughtful when he speaks. Trigger and I enjoyed spending the evening. Actually, I think it was 2 evenings with him. And I'm so pleased for the two of them that they found each other. When their book comes out about the AT, I'll let you all know. By the way, I got the COVID vaccination this morning. I've got a bit of a headache, so bear with me, will you? And a quick thank you to a new donor to the show, Thanks goes to Amanda Kumariotis, who found the donate button on our hikingradionetwork.com website and sent a bit of love our way. If you'd like to support what we do, just click on one of those buttons on the site and you can help keep these shows on the road. Thank you so much. Now is the lovely Laurie Podiger and a plea to explore locally. Here's Laurie. This is the second one of the mini-series within the ATC series of interviews of Know Before You Go. And today we have probably one of the best-known people at ATC, Laurie Podiger. Hey, Laurie, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm so glad to be talking to you, Steve.
Well, good to talk to you as well. And have I, for the first time ever, I think, when I've addressed you, have I got your last name correct?
Well, gosh, I didn't even notice. So you must have gotten it perfectly.
Podiger.
Perfect.
How about that? Fantastic.
Perfect.
Well, Laurie and I and Trigger hiked together for a morning on my 2019 hike. And let me tell you, hiking with Laurie is such an adventure. She fills you in on all the background detail of where you are, what the various plants are, history, the whole lot. So I guess I should ask you, because this is your subject, what does exploring locally actually mean?
Well, exploring locally is something that we're just really emphasizing during COVID. Of course, it can be a focus anytime, but with a virus that's contagious and the dangers of travel, we are just encouraging people to explore locally from their own backyards and their local communities. Basically, the closer the better, and to just rediscover or perhaps discover for the first time what's just really close to you. And finding that there's, all kinds of rewards in doing that.
So that's not AT specific then? That is about hiking or living generally near somewhere you can go for a walk. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Because your audience, our audience, they live all over the country and even around the world. And the advice is probably relevant just about anywhere right now, as long as we've got a pandemic going on.
Well, let's use you as an example then, Laurie.
Sure.
You don't live in the ATC building, so you have a local place you live yourself. So what's your version of exploring locally?
Well, I'm very fortunate because I live in the town, well, not technically in the town borders, but I live very close to Harper's Ferry.
Sure.
So I just walk right outside my door and I walk down the street, and there's a whole network of trails within Harper's Ferry National Historical Park. And there are even some local unmarked trails. And there's just wonderful walking streets where I found that there's an infinite variety of walks I can take of any length. And I've walked by houses and streets within a mile of my home that I had never seen living here for 30-some years. And I've also found that other people are doing this too. More people are walking as a form of exercise. More people are getting out. So it's really built a sense of community here in my town. And because we see each other out walking and we're learning each other's names. We're learning the names of our neighbors' dogs, their kids, what they do in their lives. So it's really been wonderful. And I've of course, wanted to follow ATC's guidance, but I've found it's been a lot of fun. Had a lot of discoveries that I hadn't expected.
Well, funnily enough, many years ago, I lived down in Florida. I used to live in a gated community, and I remember pointing out once we moved from that place. I'd been there for 2 or 3 years, something like that. I had never ever once, and I lived in a cul-de-sac, by the way, never once walked down the road out of that cul-de-sac. I'd driven out of it because I walked from my kitchen into my garage, into my car and out. So I kind of, that resonates with me in many ways because exploring locally was something I never really did. And I've noticed certainly this year, I've been I've been walking myself 5 miles a day. And so I go around my new local community where I've moved to. And you're right, people are out there and they want to chat, don't they? Yes.
And of course, you want to be socially distanced, be mindful of that 6 feet, and have your mask ready to wear when you might encounter people in close quarters. But one phenomenon is that of course, because so many people are getting out now, there's so fewer places to go that some of the most popular places are really crowded.
I'm sure.
Parking lots are overflowing at all the famous places. So we're really encouraging people to just look for those lesser-known trails, lesser-known spots on famous trails. Like many of the AT's famous and beauty spots are just literally overrun. Parking lots are overflowing. And even our more remote sites, I was listening to your interview with Catherine Herndon Powell last week, and she was talking about that phenomenon. But even, I think we see increased use just about everywhere, but the lesser known places, the increase is not as much. And at the same time, there are a lot of trails in this country that really are kind of hidden gems. The famous places tend to get all the attention, and it just builds exponentially. And the lesser known ones tend to get overlooked, and many of them really would welcome more visitors.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Like, for example, around here, the Tuscarora Trail was actually meant originally to be an alternative for the AT. When it looked like we were going to lose the AT due to so much of the trail being pushed onto roads, second home development, etc. In the end, the AT did get protected, but the Tuscarora Trail was built as an alternative, and that's a place where you can really get some solitude, avoid the crowds. In fact, on our website, we have compiled a list of alternate trails.
Nice.
Primarily on the East Coast, and we're adding to it all the time. In fact, I've got a couple that I want to add this week. Trails 50, I think they're 50 miles or longer in length from Florida up to Maine, and every state has ones that are great options, especially certain times of the year when the AT is crowded or they might have better weather. So this time of year, like Florida Trail, obviously, is a good option when parts of the AT might be snow covered.
The thought of wading through the Everglades doesn't appeal to me at all, by the way. That would not work for me one little bit. Funny enough, you say that about the lesser known trails, and certainly we had one of our main guests, a lady who did the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is quite a long trail itself in North Carolina, and they've expressed an interest in getting more people on their trail as well. So I know that there are these trails. Want to be adopted, don't they? In many ways, so that's quite useful. So, have you've got a link I can point people to? Don't read it out now. I'll put it in the show notes. But that'd be very helpful to me to find that to put that in there for people to try to find something else. So, what is not exploring locally? That means just going to all these popular places, is it?
Yeah, and just encouraging people the closer to home, the better. The shorter distance that you have to drive. The better, the fewer stops you can make. And it's about, of course, the title was also Know Before You Go. And really that's the first principle of Leave No Trace. It's a simplified version of plan ahead and prepare. And it's looking over your packing list before you go, even on a day hike, because the situation we have now, it's not a time that you want to have to be rescued.
Yes.
That you don't want to get injured. You don't want to have to, it's putting yourself and potentially first responders at risk if you have to be rescued. And there's some places in the country where hospitals are already full and they might not even be able to take you. So I think my mindset right now is just kind of play it safe, be cautious, make good decisions, review those 10 essentials for your packing list, and also think about the COVID particular things. You want to have that mask handy in case you need it for certain situations, hand sanitizer. You don't want to have to use privies or bathrooms where you're going, so make sure you have your hygiene kit with a trowel, and if you're going to pack out your toilet paper, Ziploc. Yeah. So just to be prepared. A lot of times, I also recommend going early in the day, especially if you're doing something more than just a simple 1 or 2 hour hike, because things happen and people get behind schedule, or they end up going the wrong direction, or just all kinds of things. And trouble seems to happen late in the day when people are tired. So often people don't think of taking a headlamp or flashlight, and boy, you can get into trouble fast when you don't have that. So start in the day, start early in the day, be conservative with your mileage, and just play it safe, save those more extreme adventures for when this is all over.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, you talk about forgetting your headlamp. I forgot mine actually we did a Woods Hole weekend a couple of months ago actually now, which was good fun and getting people try to stay socially distanced from each other. But not having your headlamp in the dark, I think once you're in the woods, I don't think anybody realises how bloody dark it can get. Yeah. It gets ridiculously dark, doesn't it? You literally virtually can't see a hand in front of your face. So make sure you've got your headlamps. Good thing. So are people listening to this advice, or do you think we're going to have another large turnout on the AT this year?
Well, are people listening? Some are. Not all are. Okay. So for long distance hiking, I mean, mostly I was talking about day hikes and closer to home, but for longer distance hikes, while we are still advising people to stay local, sure. We know that this year, 2021, there are people that just are not content to wait any longer. And we know from surveys, surveys that we've done, but social media, various websites, picked up in so many places that a lot of people just have decided they're going to go. Sure. And some may be trying to do it as conscientiously as possible. Nonetheless, ATC really wants to encourage people to wait for the maximum safety of all concerned until the pandemic is over. Either the CDC says the pandemic is under control, or there's a widely available and distributed vaccine. Uh-huh. So that's best case scenario. But reality is people are going out there. So for that reason, those that are planning long distance hikes or through hikes, we're trying to provide tools to allow hikers to spread themselves out, which is good for the trail at any time, but especially, again, during the pandemic, reducing crowds and allowing people to self-disperse is something that's going to help prevent or reduce potential spread of the disease and reduce crowding, the social impacts of being in crowds, and then all the impacts to the trail itself. But
I'm sure flip-flopping will become more of a thing this year, won't it? I know the ATC have always encouraged it, but I would think if people want to be as mindful as possible of the epidemic or the pandemic, then a flip-flop would make much more sense. Is there going to be there probably won't be an official flip-flop kickoff this year, will there?
I think it has been pretty definitively canceled.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because April there are just so many unknowns.
So in many ways, that's good as well, because that will automatically spread people out, won't it? Because if they start their flip flop from Harper's, then they'll be spread out over a period of a month or so. That's pretty cool.
Yes, although I do want to say people talk about the flip flop bubbles, but it's just it's relative to the Nobo bubble. Yes. So if people see like 10 flip-floppers, it's like, oh my gosh, this huge bubble, 2-3 hikers, and then one day 10 or maybe 14. Whereas here in the Harper's Ferry in June in the Nobo flow, we see every day 30, 30, 30, 30. Day after day for the whole month. That's the average, 30 a day. So when people talk about the flip-flop bubble, it's just because, we're coming out of winter when there were no hikers on the trail. That's right. I just want to put that in perspective.
So the message to hikers is to try, if you possibly can avoid doing a through hike, try to explore locally and not go on the trail, and try to find something nearby. As I say, I'll put that link on the website as well, and I appreciate you come talk to us about it.
Sure thing. I'll talk to you always.
Okay, Laurie. Good to talk to you. Now, you're Mountain Laurel, aren't you?
That's my trail name.
Good memory, eh? Good memory.
Yeah.
Okay, take it easy then. Speak to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Really, I'm not kidding you. If you ever get the opportunity to hike with Laurie, you should take it. She knows everything about her surroundings and is such good company. I also love a pragmatic approach. The ATC know that hikers will be on the AT again this year, but by emphasising explore locally, they may introduce some people to lesser known trails, and frankly, those trail communities will welcome you just as much as the AT will. By the way, and this is something that I've been meaning to mention for months now, if you do go to our hikingradionetwork.com website, there are a bunch of subscribe buttons for pretty much any podcasting platform that you can name. Click on one of those, subscribe to any or all of our shows, and you will never miss an episode. And talking of shows, by the way, I don't know whether some of you know, but I did put it on the Hiking Radio Network Facebook page the other day, but JR, who tried to hike the AT last year, has released another episode because he's gone back to Georgia and hiked in the snow. So check that one out. That's also on our website. Last up today is walking the Appalachian Trail and the delightful opportunity to eat as much as you like and still lose weight. How about that? I'll see you next week. Bigfoot. Food and lots of it. Mary Montgomery shook her head. I wonder again what I wonder nightly as I watch the circus in my wagon. Is man a savage at heart, skinned o'er with manners, or is savagery but a faint taint in the natural man's gentility which erupts now and again? The Sopweed Factor by John Barth. In 1990, Mary Ann Miller was a member of Warren Doyle's group of thru-hikers. When they reached New England, the mother of one of the support van drivers, Diane Watts, invited the group to her house for dinner. She asked Diane how much to prepare. Since there were 20 people, Diane suggested 20 pounds of spaghetti. Her mother said, "That's funny, hun. Now, how much do we really need to buy?" Diane said, 20 pounds of spaghetti, Mum. As Mary Ann tells it, being polite hikers that we were, we ate dinner first before we went, and then she fed us. They had lots of spaghetti and salad and bread. I don't know if she cooked 20 pounds, but there was a lot, enough for one helping each. So we ate, and she said to her daughter, "See, that was enough," after we had already eaten our dinner. Sooner rather than later, every hiker's conversation turns to food, and hikers' thoughts rarely stray far from food. The US Department of Agriculture calculates that a typical woman consumes 1,600 calories a day and a man 2,400. A typical AT hiker burns 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day, 2 to 3 times what a normal person does. A winter hiker needs even more, as he burns fuel just to keep up his body temperature. One study postulated a vicious cycle in which hikers couldn't carry enough food to replace what they burned. In a master's thesis, Karen Lutz, a 1978 thru-hiker and currently ATC's Mid-Atlantic representative, calculated that the energy expended carrying more food would be greater than the value of the extra food. She did find that despite the caloric shortfall, hikers' general nutrition was adequate. What they lack are calcium and vitamin A. For calcium, she suggests carrying powdered milk, cheese and sardines packed in oil. Dry fruits such as dates, figs and raisins are high in vitamin A. Her study was based on a small sample of 1 year's thru-hikers. Hikers may counteract the vicious cycle during their stops in town to resupply. Most hikers spend 1 day each week laying over in a town. During town stops, most eat prodigious amounts of food. Nevertheless, a typical thru-hiker loses 10 to 25 pounds and some lose up to 50 pounds. A small percentage of hikers do manage to gain weight, with some picking up as much as 20 pounds. Folk wisdom along the trail has it that those who need to lose weight do, and those who need to gain weight do too. That tendency may be correct, but hikers need to plan their diet with care. As Lutz says in her thesis, many people may leave the trail because they lack energy, an early symptom of a poor diet. Rod Kinley, a southbound hiker in 1973, started at Katahdin weighing 125 pounds, was down to 112 pounds by Monson, Maine, and finished the trail at 145 pounds. We became so efficient at our pace that I was able to gain weight despite not eating too much, he said. David Denton, a 1992 winter hiker, has become an avid student of nutrition. He also believes that many hikers drop off the trail because of poor nutrition. He thinks thru-hikers rely too much on foods that are quick and easy to prepare but barren of nutrition. In Walking with Spring, a book about his first thru-hike, Earl Schaefer wrote that near the Georgia-North Carolina line, he stopped to cook lunch. Feeling weary, he was considering dropping off the trail. Since he'd skipped some meals because of bad weather, he cooked a double portion, figuring to save the rest for later. He wrote, "To my amazement, the entire kettleful of sawdust pudding disappeared like magic, along with half a pound of brown sugar, a can of milk, and some raisins. Almost instantly, my legs lost that leaden feeling, and I felt like hiking again. It had been a case of starvation, pure and simple, despite no unusual sensation of hunger. From that time on, my strength increased, and so did my food bill." One remedy is to prepare much of your food before you start. Dan Nellis and his wife, Kathy Backpacker McClelland, both 2,000-milers, use a simple homemade dehydrator to prepare all types of nutritious meals and stockpile them for the trail. Dan also uses a lot of dehydrated milk, which helps avoid calcium deficiency. Most thru-hikers will eat just about anything. Dave Marshall survived a thru-hike in 1980, eating only macaroni and cheese every day for lunch and dinner. By the time the hike's over, though, many blanch at the thought of one more portion of macaroni and cheese or oatmeal or peanut butter. "It seemed like a long day to get to Springer on the approach trail," said Pete Woulda Coulda Shoulda Susie. "It was a big, big climb, and we had heavy packs. We stopped halfway out for a meal, and we had a can of sardines. Those sardines tasted great for some reason. At Neal's Gap, I bought 1 can of sardines for every day until our next resupply point at Wesser. We got tired of sardines, and at Wesser fed the rest of the cats there. I never have eaten a sardine again." Most AT hikers resupply about once a week. It can be tempting when one is always hungry to eat extra the first few days and be left short by the end of the week. Every thru-hiker has a favourite story about huge feasts along the trail. Mary Ann Miller recalls with gusto a trip to the restaurant at Big Meadows in Shenandoah National Park. The waitress brought us a basket of bread, and we ate all the bread and were drinking water and cokes, and we ordered lasagna. They brought us the lasagna and a basket of garlic bread, then more cokes. Then she came back and said, "Can we get you anything else?" We each ordered a half chicken and mashed potatoes and vegetables and another basket of bread. I had 8 cokes and several glasses of water too. When she came back over, we ordered dessert. Noel, the singing horseman de Cavalcanti, wrote about an incident in which 2 short-term hikers gave him 2 pieces of oatmeal bread to feed Canadian jays near their campsite. After they left, Noel gave the jays a few crumbs and ate the bread. He chuckled as he thought to himself, "Imagine giving this wonderful bread to the birds." Eateries along the way are a constant source of speculation on the highly efficient trail grapevine. One place that hikers consistently rate highly is the Inn at Hot Springs, North Carolina. It is the first real town that many northbound hikers visit, and as such a welcome sight after perhaps 3 weeks in the woods. Elmer Hall hiked most of the trail in 1976 and has run the Inn since 1977. Once a chaplain at Duke University, he has been a professional vegetarian cook for almost 30 years. When he's cooking, he displays the concentration of a great artist. So great is the respect with which his food is regarded that hikers even observe table manners there. They know that the inn is more than just a place to grab a bite. Known also as Sunnybank, this 1875 inn is on the National Register of Historic Places. Hikers have been staying in the rambling Victorian house since 1890. Jane Gentry, a long-time proprietor, was a noted folk singer. Elmer has kept up the tradition of mountain hospitality, making sure that guests mingle. He's adept at helping the motley crew that flows through the inn. Many people can point to an idea or a book that he's introduced them to, or some help he gave them finding a job. Ranking with the inn in most hikers' minds would be Shaw's in Monson, Maine. Shaw's is a boarding house run by Pat and Keith Shaw. They started out taking in mental health patients, but since June 1977, they've catered to hikers and other outdoor people. "I was born on Labour Day, and I just kept on working," Keith said. He grew up on a farm near Patton, Maine, northeast of Katahdin. At age 8, his folks gave him 8 cows to milk. Each year on his birthday, they'd add another cow. When he left home at 16, he was caring for 16 cows. He got married at 16 and had 3 daughters by 19. He's a walking testament to the miracles of modern medicine as well as to the virtue of hard work. He's overcome injuries received during World War II and recovered from several operations, including quadruple bypass surgery. He said he gets to meet some of the nicest and most interesting people in the world by staying right at home. At the opposite end of the culinary spectrum from the inn, Shaw's features traditional, hardy, Maine logging camp fare. It's hard to find a hiker who is not delighted by Pat's creations or Keith's huge breakfasts. He offers 3 breakfasts, a Shaw's, a hiker's special, and one for normal people. Pancakes are a much prized item along the trail. Some believe the Mount Cube Sugar House in New Hampshire serves the best pancakes on the AT. The trail used to run right through this historic farm, owned by former Governor and Mrs. Meldrum Thompson Jr., since they moved to New Hampshire in 1954. Now the trail crossing is 2 miles away, but many hikers still find their way to the farm at the northern base of Mount Cube. It has been called the Mount Cube Sugar House since at least 1840. Mrs. Thompson has been doing most of the cooking herself since she opened the restaurant in 1970. She is known along the trail for her pancakes. The hikers are starved for fats, she said. They eat lots of butter and mountains of ice cream. Her hiker's special breakfast is 6 pancakes and 4 sausages. They can eat that in the blink of an eye, she said. Sometimes they get a second one. The Thompsons put up hikers in a barn that features an exquisite view of Mount Moosilauke. Thanks to the birds in the barn, there are no insects. Both hikers themselves, the Thompsons, have climbed all of the New Hampshire peaks over 4,000 feet. A day doesn't go by that I don't appreciate it here, Mrs. Thompson said. Her first contact with the thru-hiker was when Grandma Gatewood stopped by on her first thru-hike. We knew about the AT, but we didn't realise then that anyone actually hiked the whole trail, Mrs. Thompson said. Grandma Gatewood came after the kids had gone to school. There was a knock on the door. It was a little old lady, almost frail looking. She had a pack like a laundry bag slung over her shoulder. She had a couple of news clippings by then, and she said, "You've probably heard of me," but I hadn't. When I asked if she'd like something to eat, she got enthusiastic. She stayed on and did her laundry. She came 2 years later. By then we were fast friends, and she was a celebrity, and she stayed over. The carrying place near the Kennebec River in Maine rated near the top of the list when Dory and Bud Williams were the proprietors. While they properly prided themselves on the quality of their food, hikers used to gorge on the breakfast. Bud would say it wasn't an all-you-could-eat pig-out place, but he wouldn't let anyone leave hungry. The standard order of pancakes was 12. The average was in the 20s, and one hiker supposedly ate 70. The story goes that the hiker went back to the nearby Pierce Pond lean-to and rested there till the following day. The magic letters along the AT are AYCE, all you can eat. Hikers flock to these places, but they in turn are not prized customers, as they have been known to practically set down roots in the throes of a gorge cycle. Another treasured commodity among hikers has always been ice cream. Most noted along the trail was the store at Pine Grove Furnace, Pennsylvania, where many hikers have tried to enter the half-gallon club by eating a half-gallon by themselves at a single sitting. The store was closed for renovations in the summer of 1993, but was expected to reopen in 1994. I remember craving ice cream so much when I got to one trail town in the south. It was so cold I was shaking, but I ate my ice cream, said Rick Hancock. Those who know ice cream favour the Vermonster, a huge assortment of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, toppings and fillings. Manchester, Vermont is a good place to try this creation, but bring some friends along to help. In 10 minutes, Bill Statsgodrick Gunderson and 3 other hikers polished off an entire Vermonster. 20 scoops of ice cream, strawberries, 4 bananas, crumbled brownies, a pint of whipped cream, hot fudge and butterscotch served in a big metal bowl. It's the only time I've had an exclusive ice cream lunch, Bill said. Rick Hancock and John Kuzniak did a 25-mile day to reach Awol Bridge in Maine. Rick recalls, some campers who were going home had some extra food, and they gave us a whole canned ham. We squatted in the road, right in the dirt, started at either end, and met in the middle. We were like 2 cannibals. Profile: David Denton. I had to be threatened with death before I took an interest in eating right, David Denton says. It's hard to listen to him for long without reconsidering what you put in your stomach. He learned the hard way that poor diet has a direct impact on your health and well-being. Thru-hikers put a lot of stress on their bodies, but if they don't take care of their feet and stomachs, they won't make it to Maine. David Denton's 1992 thru-hike was the happiest time of his life, but the aftermath was a nightmare. Several weeks after completing his hike, he was still suffering from fatigue. A doctor diagnosed his problem as a rare, fatal genetic disease called PFK, which causes muscles to degenerate. For nearly 2 months at age 25, he believed he had a terminal illness that would kill him within 2 years. It was not until 7 months after his initial complaint that he learned the truth. He had simply been undernourished during his trip. Every hiker has problems getting proper nutrition and sufficient quantities of food. David had 2 complicating factors. He has an unusually fast metabolism, and he did half of his hike in winter, starting at Springer in January and finishing at Katahdin in July. Winter hikers must consume food at a furious rate to stay warm. His condition baffled a string of doctors. "I was confused and misled," he said. "Doctors don't see too many specimens who walk in the door in as good a shape as someone who just walked from Georgia to Maine." A thru-hiker's physical condition is so out of the ordinary that if he has any kind of health problems, he needs to have the doctor understand what he's just gone through. "It took 2 months to decide it was PFK," David said. "Then 2 months to decide it wasn't. For 2 months I was pretty depressed about my life being over." David started to get better on his own, which baffled the doctors too. A specialist repeated earlier tests and did a muscle biopsy, finally proving it wasn't the rare disease. The problem, in simple terms, was that his body ran out of fuel and began eating muscle. It's not unlike an Olympic marathoner who experiences a severe fuel deficit during his race. "He doesn't just get up the next day like nothing happened," David said. "He takes a little time to recuperate." In retrospect, David believes he couldn't have hiked in winter without doing some muscle damage, though he could have minimised the problem by eating more complex carbohydrates, such as whole grain rice. His experience has made him a student and passionate advocate of proper nutrition. "It probably wouldn't have affected me if I hadn't started in winter," David said. "If 5,000 to 6,000 calories is enough in summer, you might need 10,000 to 12,000 calories in winter. You use the same amount of vitamins and minerals. The only thing you need more of is carbohydrates." His biggest mistake, he says, was using commercial processed foods from which much of the nutritional value had been removed. When David backpacks now, he eats beans and whole grain rice. He soaks the mixture all day in a pint container in his pack. This cuts the cooking time to within a few minutes of the processed foods most hikers use. He now believes that many thru-hikers quit the trail, often unknowingly, because of poor nutrition. If you cut carbohydrates out of your diet for even 2 days, you feel bad. Food really does play a big role in your well-being, he said. A number of common hiker foods are without nutritional value. It might fill you up, but it's not doing you any good. It's like putting water in your gas tank. The gauge will say full, but it won't get you anywhere. On the trail, your body is functioning on such a high level, you could probably digest anything short of nails. It's what you don't get that's a problem. You're already eating all your fat. You're dipping into your body's reserves. Cravings are not craziness. When I got to town, my body wanted the fat meat. My body wanted pure fat. I would eat a gallon of ice cream during my stay in a town. It's a standing joke. Everyone wants ice cream. It's the body telling them they want fats. Most thru-hikers start in Georgia in late spring. Starting at Springer in late January, David had some unique experiences. "I enjoyed starting in the winter," he said. "Solitude can teach you a lot. A couple of times I came close to hypothermia. I would try to write in registers and would have a tough time. If you're hiking solo in the winter, you have to pay attention to your body. There's no one to tell you if your speech is slurred." The difference in his pack weight between winter and summer was 40 pounds. In the winter, he carried 4 sets of insulated underwear. Yet, there were times when I had every stitch of clothing on and I was still chilly. I'd be in my tent, inside a shelter, in a sleeping bag, rated for 0 degrees. Didn't have any body fat left. That gets you cold in a hurry. One of his worst times on the trip occurred just south of Mount Rogers, Virginia, on White Top Mountain. I crisscrossed the open summit and finally saw the blazes go into the woods. There was a big drop-off from the snowbank. I went face in with my pack on top of me. I couldn't get out. It was like being in an ice bath. It took me 20 seconds to know I would be able to get out. By then I was able to wriggle out of my pack, but I was 6 feet deep, face down. It was a little scary, a minute's worth of fright. A highlight of the trail for him was meeting the people in towns. It took me 3 towns to realise that I wasn't dreaming, that the people really were that nice. I'd never been around that many nice people. It's more so in winter. People were just shocked when they found out I was a thru-hiker. First, they thought I was crazy. Then they'd feel sorry for me. Then they'd take me home. Problems with his feet drove David off the trail for a week in Hot Springs. His feet had stretched from a size 10 to a 12 and he had to get new boots. By 50 miles before Hot Springs, my feet were really bad, he said. Most of my toenails were gone. A podiatrist told me that everybody's feet would stretch widthwise, but the shoes will too. You can predict whose feet will stretch lengthwise and cause problems. If the little toes are longer than the big one, even if they're curled under, the feet stretch out. Later, in Pennsylvania, 15 miles north of Duncannon, he stopped at the Peters Mountain Shelter. I was sleeping away, and at 11:30 there was a loud crash. I could see two of my silvery metallic food bags and the dim outline of a bear. He just stood there, then sauntered off. I put my boots on and went after him. I tried to make noise and scare him, hoping he'd drop some of my food so I'd have some the next day. Then I got my camera because I'd heard that sometimes that scares them. That didn't work, but I got some good bear shots. The next day I got to thinking, what if he'd been really hungry and snacked on me? But all in all, it was pretty neat having that experience. I wasn't hurt, he just wanted my food. Like many hikers, David was flooded with conflicting emotions when he climbed Katahdin. I definitely didn't want to finish the trail, David, who lives in Atlanta, said. If I'd had the money, I'd have turned round and walked back to Georgia. There's a drop in spirits when your trip is over. I stayed with another thru-hiker for 3 days and eased back into civilization. It's good to share that time with someone who understands your experience instead of someone who has no clue about what you've just gone through. Despite the traumatic physical problems in the aftermath of his hike, David has fond memories of the AT. Hiking the trail was the happiest time of my entire life, he said. I learned more about myself. I don't think a thru-hike could be overrated if you're having a good time. I was tired, but I was always in hog heaven hiking the AT.